just came up with another bright idea. I am so smart, suddenly it just appeared. There's a light above my head, sometimes white and sometimes red. Bright ideas make it glow, and very soon the rest of the world will know. I just came up with a really bright idea. I am so smart, suddenly it just appeared. I just came up with another bright idea. I am so smart, suddenly it just appeared. There's a light above my head, sometimes white and sometimes red. I just came up.
Good morning, everybody. It's just gone 9 o'clock, so we will start. Good morning and welcome to the So You Want to Get Ahead webinar. A really warm welcome to our panelists this morning, and of course you, our audience. A particular welcome to Dame Alison Peacock, who is online with us this morning. Thank you so much, Alison, for showing your support. I'll start with the technical parts of the webinar. We would encourage you really to keep your cameras off because there are a number of people coming on, and so that you get a clear view of the panelists, we would ask that the cameras stay off throughout, please. Secondly, also, if you could keep your microphones muted. There may be some time at the end to take live questions, but throughout the presentations, if you can keep your microphones muted, that would be appreciated also. Clearly, there is going to be an opportunity for you to ask questions. I will be picking up the questions as we move through. So if you could put those in the chat box, then again, if you want a question targeted at a particular panel member, then please put their name next to it. If it's a general question, then again, just throw that in there. The best way probably to proceed, if you have your viewing, I would probably put your viewer on speaker view, in which case you will get the highlighted speaker on your screen for the duration of that period. So if you go into your settings and find speaker view, I think that would be helpful for you also. So my name is Anne Palmer, and I am the CEO of Fig Tree International and the organizer of this event. We've underlined it under the title of Black History. Is it just a Black History event? For me, no, because we believe every month of the year is a time to celebrate the achievements of both Black and Asian leading professionals. We say, one of the sayings is that we stand on the shoulders of giants. Well, we have to be aware that the rise of Black and Asian leaders has been apparent for some time. But what we know is that there is still a limitation in terms of those getting to the very, very top. I'm not going to go through the stats. We've been on, lots of webinars and things that tell us about the sad state of affairs, particularly the research that Professor Paul Miller has done more recently. But my clear message to you is that some of us have got to the top, and we are looking and we are inspired by people that you're going to see in front of you this morning, and people that are coming online. You, as the audience, are our inspiration, because we know that this is certainly the time for change. And, now's the times that things need to move on. So we have a fantastic panel of trailblazers here with you. What have I asked them to talk about? Well, I've said that they can talk about anything, which is really strange, but each of them has their own very personal story. We can't say that we haven't had our challenges. They can't say that they haven't had their challenges in school leadership, as have all school leaders. But we know there are particular challenges for BAME leaders. So they are going to tell their stories. I want you to be informed. I want you to be motivated. I want you to be inspired. Yes, it is 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning, but we're going to hear some fantastic stories this morning. And with that, I'm going to introduce our first speaker, who is Gwyneth Simpson, and she is the head teacher of Lee Manor High School. Welcome this morning, Gwyneth, to you.
Thank you, Anne, and thank you for inviting me to speak today, and welcome to all the people who are attending. So I'm going to take what Anne said, and I'm just going to talk for 10 minutes, and I'm going to start off. I'm going to take you through my career. So I started teaching in 1998. And when I was preparing for this, I was reminded about when I interviewed for the PGCE. So I interviewed for my PGCE in 97. And at the time, there were the two sort of leading places from a London perspective was the Institute of Education and the Roehampton Institute. Now, someone told me it was difficult to get into the Institute of Education, so I was going to interview for that because that's who I am. But I lived and grew up in Wandsworth, and the Roehampton Institute was near me. Now, whilst I grew up in that area, I never actually went to school there. So I thought maybe the Roehampton was a more sensible choice because I could be local. And so I interviewed. And when I interviewed, I was asked this question. I was asked, why did I want to work in a white middle class institution? And I was absolutely floored. And what it did for that moment, it took me back to when I was 16 and I went for my first job interview, which was at Sainsbury's in Putney. I was so excited. You can imagine my first job interview, part-time job. And I was asked, do you have any brothers? And I'm thinking, oh, this is nice and friendly. So I said, yes, I have 4, because I do. And then I was asked if they had any criminal records. And at 16 years old, and we're talking, late 80s, early 90s, it was kind of, you've got to understand that time to understand how you received that question. So when I was asked in 1997 why I wanted to work in a white middle class institution, it floored me. I didn't know what to say. So I just said, well, I live in one. I couldn't answer it any other way. And then, you know how the UCAS goes, you have to accept a place and then it moves on. Well, I refused the place, and I got a phone call from her, and she phoned and asked me why I'd refused the place. And I said, I didn't think it was the right place to start my career. And then I felt really kind of vindicated. I thought, yeah, I told you, you had to phone me. But actually, that was the Gwyneth then, young and naive. I don't reckon her chances if she met me now. But at that time, that was my voice, and it was personal. So I was happy for that. Anyway, I went to the Institute, and I started my school at the Brit School, which is a performing arts school in Croydon. And it only has students from year 10 onwards. Now, I was a secretary before that. And so I come out of business industry into education. But because the Brit is run by industry professionals and academics, it's run like a business. It's very, very organized. And so the transition from business into education was quite easy for me because I went into an organized environment and I learned my craft. And it's really important that I learned how to teach. And I remember being at Institute of Education, and my other students on the course were saying, oh, children were shutting doors in their faces and swearing at them. And I was thinking, oh my God, I've just got kids singing and dancing. What, when I go into the real world, what am I going to do? So even though I was that pupil at school that would probably shut the door in your face, I didn't have to deal with me. So I went to a talk at the Institute about how to deal with difficult behavior. And it was a very, very calm way of addressing behavior in school. And I love that because I'm a very calm person. I love calm. So it was very much about taking ownership of your room and about education. And actually, I wasn't taught how to deal with behavior. I was taught how to educate my pupils so that they remained focused. At that time, we didn't have a lot of data. So we were having students join the school in year 10 without any information. All I knew was what was the end result. And so I learned how to stretch and challenge, how to take people to the end regardless of their starting point. So I was quite blessed in my beginning, actually, as a teacher. But I always had this passion to work in challenging schools, and I got my desire in my second school. I have to mention this, I never saw a school calendar until I went to my third school. After that, after the Brit, I never saw a calendar. I worked in schools that were in special measures, that were turnaround schools, that there was a lot, at that time, there was a lot of bullying, there was a lot of survival in education, there was a lot of papering over the crisis management was rife. I learned to survive. In my second school, I used to teach with my door locked. It was that bad. I used to teach with my door locked. You would get told, there's a parents' evening tomorrow. You come down the stairs in reception and there would be families fighting in reception. And you think, what is going on? But I loved the school, and I just felt this is where I want to be. And as I progressed in my career, I started to realize that actually what was missing in these schools was strong, powerful leadership. And that what those students needed was strong, they needed the best leaders in their schools to bring about change. I was very lucky. The two heads of departments that I first worked with were amazing. I really learned my craft. I learned how to be a second in department. I learned how to lead a department. I was English is my subject specialism, and I learned how to do curriculum development, and I learned to build teams. But I started to look at the next level up, and I thought, there wasn't anybody that was inspiring me. I had a child, and I decided to take my foot off the pedal a little bit, and I became a consultant in the London Borough of Wandsworth. Now, Wandsworth has very good schools, and when I went there, getting a credibility as a consultant is not easy, and I did. And I'm proud of that. But I also was working for the DfE. We can talk about the waste of the money on the national strategy. But anyway, that was rife at the time, and it was about pushing that forward. And I worked doing behaviour and attendance across that town. I learned a lot about myself and my leadership. I went back into school, and I worked for a head teacher who was very emotional. And a bully. And again, I was in that environment where, this is the start of my senior leadership journey. And here I am with this person who can't take me anywhere. And I discovered Future Leaders. Now, Future Leaders worked well for me in that it taught me to look at my characteristics and analyze myself as a leader. And to, I talk about uncomfortable conversations when we talk about race. But you have to, as a leader, have that uncomfortable conversation with yourself. And so I was very fortunate that I was able to learn that through the Future Leaders. I could have another conversation about the inequalities of future leaders and about other people getting pushed forward before you, but that's a different conversation. But what I'll take from it is what I learned about myself as a leader, and what I felt were the strong characteristics needed to change specifically those types of schools. And that was always my focus. As I moved on, I went for a job in an organisation, in an academy trust that believed in no excuses, 100%. And I thought, this is it, I'm home. This is what I believe in. I'm going to love working for this organisation. Although I was invisible, I didn't exist. Even though I'm 6 foot, and you can't ignore me, but I didn't exist. I wasn't seen because I wasn't. My credibility as a leader wasn't seen by those people in power, because it was a very white, middle-class, privileged organisation. And if you are a privileged white middle-class leader, you're going to look for leaders that look like you, that sound like you. And I didn't. And I went for a job interview, and the person who went against me did not have my depth of experience, didn't understand the cultural dynamic of the school we were serving, hadn't done the things I did, but she got the job because her face fitted. A year later, we were in the same position, and I outperformed her on every single level. So we had a small school system, and I outperformed her on low exclusions, attendance, behaviour, staff, in every single area. I didn't do it on purpose. I just did my job. But that's an example of where you are not seen. Now, when I worked for that head teacher, the head teacher was brilliant. I learned systematic leadership. I learned how to, we talk about strategy and understanding strategic approach. But if you don't understand the systematic aspects of that, how do I make strategic development happen, and how do I go through those systems and have those checking points? And when you become a head teacher, you need to have those checking points. You need to know literally what needs to happen so that I'm on that strategic trajectory of success. You have to be able to do it, because when you're ahead, believe me, there's only you, and you've got to trust everybody underneath, and you've got to be able to know what they're doing and that it's happening, because you don't want any surprises. And if you're like me and go into crazy schools, you're going to get a few surprises. But the thing that I would say, and I'm rushing through, I became a Her Majesty's Inspector. There's lots of other things I did. I worked in a PRU. I left that trust, that academy trust, because I was invisible. No point in my life have I ever felt invisible until then. I felt that I didn't exist, and it was a horrible feeling. I walked out of that job with nowhere to go. My faith is very strong. I'm a Christian, and I just thought, well, God will provide, I'll be okay. And that's what happened. So a lot of people can't understand that, but I walked out, of that school with nowhere to go, but I knew that my soul was dying and that I didn't exist there. And I went to, I was leaving education. I thought, that's it, I'm done. If this school, if this academy trust believes in what I believe in, and I can't be seen here, well, I'm done. The education's finished for me. But everyone's, oh, you're mad. And I was like, no, I'm done. But anyway, I ended up going to a Peru, and I thank God for that as well, because when I went there, I learned a whole different way and a greater sense of humility. And I learned about send in a bigger way that I didn't know. Anyway, I went there, and then I still wasn't sure if I wanted to go back into education, but I knew that I'd done all I was going to do in that Peru and fight in the local authority for justice for the young people that were there. And then I became Her Majesty's Inspector. And I have to say this, I know I'm running with the time here, but as a Her Majesty's Inspector, it is the only job I have ever done where nobody looked at me, where I could just do my job. So when you're HMI, I live in Watford, and so I could have gone to London or the east of England as a region to work in. And of course, I decided to go to east of England because I was like, well, you don't see me in the east of England, so that's where I'm going. But people are more aware and conscious of the HMI badge than anything. They're not looking at you. They're so scared of it. It's like being Bond. So well, I couldn't be Bond, obviously, because I'm a woman and I'm black, so you can't be Bond. But you come with the HMI thing, and it's like Gwyneth Gibson HMI, and people are so nervous. And so whilst where I worked, the people, the HMIs that I worked with, I realized I was black. When I was out on inspection, it didn't matter. So it was the first time that I really got to apply strategic approach, deep dive, looking at what was going on. So I was really blessed with that. So I would say my last head teacher who taught me systematic approach, the PRU, which taught me to remember why I was doing this and to humble myself, and HMI is why I am a head teacher, and that geared me, and I'm really grateful for that. So my parting message to you would be, one, know your craft. Know your craft, right? Even if you don't know an area, because when you do HMI, they're risk averse. So I've got the game face. So when you do HMI, you cannot not know anything. So you do skillful questioning and you find out. So if you haven't experienced every area, find out from somebody, find somebody that's your partner, find out from them, read about it, learn about it. Because even when you're leaders, even if you've got and I've got a great leadership team, even if you've got a fantastic leadership team, know more than they do. So know what you're doing so that you trust. And the other thing is trust yourself. Absolutely trust yourself, because you will come across challenge, but you've got to stick fast to, I'm talented, I'm experienced, I know what I'm talking about, and you don't understand, but that's okay. This is what's happening. So trust yourself. Sorry, I ran over.
I'm already speechless, Gwyneth. I know that's very hard to believe. Thank you so much indeed. We're going to move straight on to David. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. I wanted to share with you a little bit about my journey. I'm from the East End, and a little bit like Gwyneth, I'm very tall. I'm 6'3", and I became 6'3" when I was 14 years old. And so you can imagine what I am like. I'm your typical black boy in an inner city school. That's me. But when I was looking for role models about what I might do in the future, I could look around my family, I could look around other people in the family, I could look to sport. One of my cousins was an international runner, representing Great Britain. And so I thought, you know what, maybe I could be a sportsman like him, and I could start doing that. And then when I went to school, the school that I went to, basketball was the sport at the school, and I'm there 6'3". So my coach was a guy called Humph Long, legendary Humph Long, one of the best basketball coaches in the country's ever known. And so he taught me to play basketball. And so I spent most of my teenage years playing basketball, running up and down the country, doing all sorts of stuff and training and working hard. And what I discovered through sport is that if you put the time in, if you work really, really hard, then you can become the best. And if you then become the best, then people are looking at statistics and they can see what you did in the game. They can see whether or not you were a good defender or if you're a good attacker. And so all that statistics just keeps mounting up. The other option that I had was to be a musician. Some of my cousins were reggae musicians and reggae producers and promoters, you know, the sort of thing. And so the option I had was to go and join in with what's going on there. I love music. I played the bass guitar myself as my key instrument. I was involved in the orchestra at school. And so all of these things led me to be thinking, well, maybe I could become a professional musician. So my options and my role models in those sorts of areas were really quite positive. A little bit like Gwyneth, I'm a Christian. I was brought up in the church. I was in the church for before I even knew how to speak. I was in church colouring at the back. I was one of those children. And I've gone on to sort of live my whole life in the church. And I could have been a church minister. It could have been the pathway that God had for me. But as it turned out, my mom, she had an ambition for me. Her ambition was I was going to be a doctor. Now, some of you will know this ambition. If you're a part of a black family, it goes something like this. All of the family are nurses. And so you, David, your job is to go to the next job up. And the next job up is to be a doctor. Now, there's only one problem with me becoming a doctor. I wasn't really that interested in medicine. I was more interested in fixing stuff, physics, maths, subjects like that were the subjects I was really good at school. And so I wanted to become an engineer. I wanted to solve problems. I was interested in economics and all the sorts of things that perhaps you don't normally expect black children to be involved in. And there weren't very many role models. But what I found was that if I started to have more of an international perspective on these things, there were plenty of role models. You know, if you're thinking bigger and more globally, and this is a point I want to come back to, then your role models change. Whereas if the role models that you're looking at are only the ones that are in front of you, then that can cause you to limit your options. So I was very blessed. I went to a church primary school, a church secondary school. My teachers believed in me. They encouraged me to work hard and they encouraged me to be the best version of myself. And so I went off to university not intending to be a teacher. This was not going to be my career. I was going to be an engineer. And it was only by chance I was at church. And this was in Sheffield. I went to university in Sheffield. I was at church, and one of the ladies at church said to me, "Look, David, I've got a couple of black boys in my primary class. I wonder if you just come down and just give me some help with them." And me being me, I'm a helpful sort of person. I thought, all right, fine, I'll go down. So I went and worked with them. And at the end of that, she said to me, "David, have you not considered becoming a teacher?" Now, at that point, I'd already signed up for a PhD in engineering. I'd got my scholarship sorted out. Everything was all sorted out. And I thought, well, I'll apply to a PGC as well. What harm could it do? And a couple of friends of mine were teachers, and my wife, she's a teacher as well. So I was thinking, you know what, I'll give it a try. It might suit me. Well, I discovered a job where I got paid to do all my hobbies. I mean, it was just amazing. And so I could coach basketball every Friday. I coach basketball even now. 2 hours on a Friday. All the kids who enjoy playing basketball, I'll go and coach them. And so that's part of my job. I get paid to do that. I get paid to be nosy and inquisitive. And so I'm an Ofsted inspector part of the week. And so I'll go out on an Ofsted inspection. I'll go and find out about what's going on in the school and talk to children about how they're getting on. Even now I'm running a survey, a national survey, to find out how children have got on through lockdown. You know, for me, it's really a sort of curiosity. And I'm one of those sorts of people who's an honorary member of virtually every department in the school. You know the sort of person I mean? And so I'll go and teach a little bit in this department, a little bit in that department, help out with music productions because I'm a sound engineer. And so you end up sort of being immersed in what is school. And so for me, it's been a really great experience. I know lots of people, and some of the people that I mentor talk to me about the difficulties that they've had as Black people in the workplace. But I've been fortunate and I've been able to just keep moving around all those difficulties. And I think it did help actually that I was in Derbyshire and Cheshire now, and away from the stereotypical places. And I think sometimes we're afraid to do that. But as we've heard, I think sometimes you just need to be willing to take the opportunities wherever they may arise. So some takeaways, some things that I wanted to really share with you. The first one is about being authentic. If you are just yourself, if you bring yourself to the workplace, it makes a really big difference in how you perform. If you try to be somebody else, then inevitably you will fail. And so you've just got to bring yourself. And I found one of my colleagues, Rosemary Campbell-Stevens, some of you will know Rosemary, she talked about authentic leadership. And she talked about being part of the global majority. I'll say that again, global majority. So when you go in a mindset, when they talk about BAME, I don't like BAME. When they talk about BAME, the bit in BAME that I don't like is the minority. It's trying to make you feel small. It's trying to make you feel as insignificant, almost invisible. Whereas actually, when you think of yourself as being part of the global majority, if you're someone like me, then you look to someone like Nelson Mandela or Kofi Annan, and you look to these sorts of people as being your role model, and it lifts you. It lifts you in a way that you wouldn't be lifted if you didn't take that view. So, you know, if you want you to look for the best sports person in the world, you're going to be looking for Usain Bolt. If you're looking for some of the best musicians in the world, you're talking about people like Stevie Wonder. You're talking about Marvin Gaye. You're talking about Black people. If you're thinking about the people of faith, and I'm a Christian, then you're talking about Jesus. So I've been really privileged. I've been a head of a church school, an inner city church school. That was a real privilege for me. But I want to talk a little bit now about governance. And I want to talk about the last school that I applied for a job. And last time I applied and got a job was back in 2005. So you just got to realize that there are people like me who sort of get a job and settle, and we don't move. And I'm retiring in next month. And so I've spent 15 years working in one place. And that place is a place called Congleton. It's in Cheshire. And what happened was they advertised the role. I came across for interview and I met there a team of governors that were absolutely fantastic. It was led by a woman who had been a woman in a man's world. She'd been in the world of finance, and she knew what it felt like for people to undervalue her because of her color or because of her being a woman. And so because of that, she was brave enough to choose me of all the other candidates to become the head teacher, the first Black head teacher in Cheshire in the secondary sector. And the governors that she had, they were all the sort of people that you wanted to work for. Congleton's a small community. We have 30,000 inhabitants, and we educate about half the children in the town, secondary wise. And so you're part of a community. My own children have gone to school as well. My daughter finished there and did her A-levels there. And so it's a different type of school. It's a sort of school like the first school that I worked at, which was a high-performing school. And so what the governance did was they got involved in the life of the school. I would be educating people who were my neighbors, people who were members of the church with me, and we would have this integrated model. And so governance is really, really important. And what I want you to take away really on governance, because my time is running out, is that governance is the one thing that you should consider getting involved in as part of your career trajectory. I'll tell you why. Lots of people complain and they say, look, we don't understand what's going on when we go for headship interviews. And part of the reason you don't understand is because you've not been involved in governance. The people involved in governance want to serve their community. They want to do the very best that they can to ensure that the young people in the area that they cherish get the best education. And they don't want to take risks with that. And so sadly, sometimes they are looking at the person who fits their stereotype and their biases because they don't want to get it wrong. But there are some governors who are more like business. You'll notice if you look at the top sports teams, they don't care what nationality you are. They just want to find who is the best at doing that task. And if it happens to be someone like Dan Sturridge, a top footballer, they're going to pick them to be the striker. If it's in the world of other types of things like music, they're looking for the best singer. They don't care what color that person is. If that person has got a voice that will melt people's hearts, then they want to hear from that person. So it should be in governance. And as we get more involved in governance, then we will start to have an influence that will mean that the best person will be chosen for jobs. And so I'm saying to you, you need to go through that experience of being in the governing body. Being in the governing body, no longer will you be talking about the concrete ceiling or the glass ceiling. You'll be talking about, now I understand their perspective on risk. Now I understand their perspective on stakeholder engagement. Now I understand a bit more about the financial leadership and management of the school, the HR responsibilities that come with the job. And just as you build all of those skills up, you then get to a point where you are the master of a craft. And just as Gwyneth has said, as you become a master of the craft, then you can move on into actually being the person who does that role, because people will know that that is a role that you can successfully achieve. So, in summary, it's really, really important to have role models. A lot of role models, we think locally. I'm saying think globally when you do your role models. The second thing is about being authentic. You've got to bring yourself to the workplace. Just be yourself. Don't try to be anybody else. And if you're in the workplace where being yourself is what they want, then you'll have a fantastic time, like I've done for the last 15 years at the places that I've worked at. And then thirdly, get involved in governance, because governance is the place at which the ultimate decision making happens within schools. And taking this even further, some people complain and say, why aren't there enough Black head teachers or Asian head teachers? And a lot of it is down to governance. The people who are making that choice need to feel comfortable that you are not going to let them down. And you can do that by learning their language and getting inside and then getting involved. Okay, I've had my time. I'm going to hand on to Bushra. Over to you, Bushra.
Thank you, Bushra.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks, David. Thanks, Gwyneth. Yeah, it's really interesting hearing those talks, and I hope I can add a little bit more to them. For me, it's really odd that tomorrow actually, is 60 years since I arrived in England. 1st of November, I arrived on a cold, wet November evening, unable to speak English, totally in a different environment from Pakistan where I'd been brought up. And to reflect today that from that very quiet, timid child to being a CEO of a number of schools, having been a head teacher as well, and my journey, I just find it very humbling to be able to talk to all of you today. And, you know, I think where I am now, obviously, as a CEO of a multi-academy trust, I've got 3 wonderful children, grandmother of 7 children, and a pleasure for me to be involved in lots of voluntary organisations and the Deputy Lord Lieutenant of Greater London. My journey into teaching started because actually my life was changed by teachers. I think I'm going to say, when I was in the primary school, I remember the head teacher, for example, every Friday would put about half an hour aside, you know, to teach me English. It was really odd. You know, my brother and I had gone to this this primary school, and it was very rare to see Asian children in 1916 schools. We were different. And in fact, we were very lucky at that time because we were made to feel very special, and lots of people took a lot of interest in us. I remember going to, at the age of 13, going to a grammar school. I passed my 13 plus, having failed my 11 plus, and a Latin teacher who would see me regularly because I hadn't done Latin, who would actually take time to sit with me, you know, mentor me, coach me, guide me to make up the work that I'd missed for 2 years so I could catch up with the class. So I think for me, the inspiration for teaching has come from the teachers who actually gave me, you know, a great deal of time and effort and believed in me. So that's where my passion has come from. And also it's made me realize that what we do as teachers is actually change lives. My life was changed by teachers, and I hope on my journey, I've been able to help and change other people's lives as well. One of the other things I want to mention, obviously, I was one of those people who tried to balance a career with a family, and women have this challenge all the time. I stayed in one job for 15 years out of choice because I had a young family, and I did not want to be having to add a lot of traveling time, you know, to my day, because I wanted to be around. I felt my children were very important. I had 3 wonderful children. But, you know, I did actually get promoted from within. I stayed in the same school for 15 years, loved it, loved the balance between, being a professional as a teacher, but also being able to be a mother and enjoy, my children the best that I could. Now, I could have only have done that with the support that I had from my extended family, my mother in particular, my husband, and also a choice I made, which was not to waste a lot of time traveling. And then came a crunch. A deputy headship came up in that post in the school that I loved. I'd been there as part of the local community. And when I applied for that post, there were a number of internal candidates, and it was a national advert as well. And in the shortlist, there were 5 candidates. I was one of 2 internal candidates. And I didn't get the job. And it was really interesting that a chair of governors actually phoned me after I didn't get the job and said, Bushra, you were the best candidate for the job, but you weren't appointed because I realised, and she was the chair of the panel, that if you'd been appointed, the head would have made your life hell because she wanted the other internal candidate. Now, that made you feel absolute rubbish. But for me, it was a turning point. It made me realize, do I want to work in a school? And I was a head of science, a senior teacher and so on, or do I want to take that plunge? So imagine that was my only school that I'd worked in. I've got my family, I'm doing well. And that for me was a turning point. It made me actually think about applying to another school. I applied to another school, got another rejection. And I remember laying in bed crying. And my husband said to me, Bushra, if I could go out and buy something for you, which is your job, I would do it. I can't do that. So please just get up, sit down, have a meal with me and put it in perspective. And so you need support when you are rejected, but actually it's you yourself who've got to deal with those rejections, no matter how much love and support you have. And I also believe it's really odd in chance. Things happen by chance. So when I was rejected from my second post, I was actually in a car with somebody who was living very near me, who also was rejected. And he said, Bushra, there's a job going at Plashett School. Why don't you apply there? I said, listen, I got rejected in my own school. I've got rejected from this school. That's it. I'm just going to grin and bear it. And, he said, no, you should go for it. Go for it. His encouragement, made me actually get the application form for Plashett, where I did apply. A month later, I was being interviewed for that job, and I was appointed as a deputy head. Now, sometimes coming out your comfort zone, I came up to a different borough, a different job, a very different style of leadership, and wow, did I grow? Did I develop? The head teacher believed in me, and she just allowed me to blossom in that post. And then came something which was a real surprise to me, that the head teacher, due to a personal bereavement actually in her family, she decided to leave. So I'd only been in the post 2.5 years. The head was leaving, 2 other people in senior leadership were leaving. And I felt myself quite relatively new as a deputy. But I thought if I don't apply for the headship, I'd either work with a totally new team, or I go for the job. And I remember looking out of the window, actually, of my office as a deputy head at the students in the school. And I thought, this is the sort of school I'd love to be head of. And I thought, 5-6 years down the line, when I'm ready, I feel ready, this school won't exist. So I took that plunge. And to this day, I remember my father, sadly, who passed away, when I said to him, do I go for this job? He said, why not? Why shouldn't you go for that job? You're a deputy, so that means you have been in the position of the head, so go for it. So 1993 was really, Marvel will remember the time in Newham at that time, to be appointed as a head teacher of the school. And it coming on to David's point about people who make decisions. I remember one of the local authority advisors who's going to be on the panel said to me, Bushra, do you know, in Newham, we've never appointed a deputy to the headship of the same school. that really surprised me. And I said, I won't say his name, he's really somebody very dear to me. And I said, there's always a first. And it proved to be true. That I was appointed, and he was on the panel. And he goes, at the end of it, he goes, Bushra, you proved me wrong. And I had the privilege of leaving that school for 20 years. And it was wonderful to see that change happen, aspirations change, the results changed. We had, 3 successive outstanding Ofsteds. Were featured in a national report about 12 outstanding schools excelling against the odds. And wow, it was my joy to be part of, that school and to lead it on its journey. Sometimes things happen in life that make you just reflect. So 2 years prior, in 2010, out of the blue, I had heart surgery. No symptoms, no nothing. I went for a checkup and they found I had a major blockage in one of the main arteries. And they, within 5 days I had surgery and recovered really, really fast. And then I returned to school for 2 years because I wanted to go back in order to enjoy the headship. But I'd made a mental decision at 60 I was going to retire because, I had done, the school was at that peak and I wanted to leave in that position. So in 2012, and people couldn't understand why I was leaving. I felt good. I felt probably better than I had been a few years before then, prior to the heart surgery, but I decided to leave and thought, okay, the world's my oyster. I'll do whatever I want. And thought I was going to put my feet up, go on loads of holidays, which I did. And David looked forward to that. You did, but there comes a point. I think work and education is in my blood. And it's something I've just started with lots of voluntary stuff, loads of mentoring and coaching for people. And it just led me into a position where I was able to help some schools, first in a voluntary capacity in a totally almost white area, whereas the school I'd worked in was in a very multicultural area. So again, took me out of my comfort zone, a bit like Gwyneth. I wanted to work in a different area and in a voluntary capacity, and then landed up, long story, but as their CEO. And I'm loving it. Really, really. Even the problem now with the COVID and managing one school to managing 4 schools, the privilege of working with talented head teachers, helping them on this journey, it's just such a wonderful experience. And my belief really is that hard work will get you to the top. When you're in a role where, when I was a head of science, there were predominantly males when I was a head of science. So I was breaking a little bit of a stereotype there. When I became a head, and, a newspaper informed me I was one of the first Muslim head teachers, female head teachers in the country. That puts a lot of responsibility on you. It's a privilege and an honor, but it's a responsibility, and you can't do it just as well. You've got to do it better. And I think I've always been driven. And my father, being an immigrant, I saw that role model where he was actually driven. So I believe things in destiny. That job at Plashit was my destiny. My job as a CEO, I think, was not something I planned. It happened. But the one thing I do believe is that by helping others on their journey, what you give, you receive so much more. And I just like to end with a quote, really. A candle loses nothing by lighting another candle. And I hope that I've been able to, in my journey, being able to help other people to light their candles. And I hope each and every one of you will be able to light other people's candles so we can all progress in the future. I'll hand back to Anne.
Bushra CBE. It was an honor when I met you 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago. And it's an honor that you're still my friend.
Thank you.
And that was really, really inspirational. Thank you so much. Oz, over to Oz here. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Gwyneth, then David, then Bushra. How is that fair? Put all the heavyweights, then it's this one. Right, okay. Here we go. I'm going to talk about some international headship, but like my colleagues on the panel, I'm going to start with how I started, basically. I'm an engineer. My degree was in engineering, loved it. Like David, yeah. I love making things, very hands-on approach, problem solving. I left engineering and worked in a inner city Catholic school as a network engineer. I love my networks, IT, etc., etc. What was happening is I was visiting classes at the background while fixing computers, putting some programs in, and I'm looking at some, shall we say, borderline teaching, shocking teaching, and it's itching me to say, you know what, I can go in there and spend 5 minutes and fix that Visual Basic program for those kids, whereas it's so long-winded. And the head approached me once and said, would you like to give yourself a few hours with those sixth form students? And I absolutely loved it since then. I'm not going to dwell into how it all happened, but as a graduate teaching program I was put on, they did not want to lose me from the school to go off and do my training. So it was a program they put in school that was lovely. It was very, very close to home, literally a 2-3 minute walk, although I drove, as you do. But that was a really, really good start for me. It was a kickstart for me, a platform for me to meet some awesome individuals. Some of them I'm still friends with. Moving away from that, 7 years in that school, I ended up as a head of faculty. There was a boys' school, a girls' school, and a post-16 merged together. 17 members of staff I was working with, and then I had my first leadership shout. And Palmer's smiling a bit, but it was Anne Palmer's school. It was a really, really, can I say, a disturbing, crazy inner city school. God, I thought I'd done really well at the interview, but I wasn't so sure when I had a walk around. The vice principal there, she's also on there, Lucy. When I had the tour of the school, I'm like, there is no way I'm going to cope in this school. It was absolutely crazy. And it was only the current leadership's, I would say, few months into trying to fix this school. It was the academies program when the old academies, failing schools turning into academies. Now, I got appointed, absolutely delighted. This was my first leadership kind of jump, my stage to kind of showcase what I can do. And did we do? And I say we had a phenomenal leadership team. There were some on that leadership team that needed to be, I want to be polite, but maybe I shouldn't go. There were a few on that leadership team that needed to be asked to kind of hop on, jog on. But eventually that school, the kids, the parents, the change management, amount of meetings we've been involved with. We were builders, we were educators, we were mothers, fathers, we were chasing them around the building, making sure that we were chased by dogs at one occasion. Lucy remembers, Anne remembers clearly, but it was one of those things. Then I got this call similar to Bushra in a car. I got this call through a friend to say there is a vice principal's role in an international setting and they're looking for grafters, people who can do it. And I put my hat in there and I threw my hat in there, had an interview. I thought it was a great interview. This was an online Skype interview. Then they wanted to see me in Hammersmith at a hotel. And we turned up, there was 11 candidates. I was the only Asian candidate. The rest of the candidates were I'd say, white, deputy heads, some heads. And it was a very rigorous, I think, 8 hours worth of interviews, and the CEOs flew in from the Middle East to meet all of us. Now, everybody got good 40 minutes, 45 minutes of an interview. I got about 20 minutes. So at the back of my mind, I'm thinking, it's going to be formality. It's going to be tea, coffee. Let's go for the coffee and call it a day, get on the train, head back to London. But that 20-minute then turned into a bit of dinner with the CEO at one of the local pizza places to say, you know what, come and talk to me, because there's something that we've seen in you. I still don't know what that was, that we've not seen in the others, is the fact that you can roll your sleeve up and you can crack on with it. So we need a vice principal that can support the head. The head is really, really struggling. Now, I immediately looked up the head. I immediately looked up the schools. They had 3 massive schools, 1,600 students per school, in total 6,000 students. Now, I didn't realize that these settings were early years, EYFS, primary, secondary, post-16. Got the job with the family, flew over to Qatar, beautiful place, by the way, if anybody fancies a holiday. Got my first job as a VP with a really nice head teacher. Unfortunately, he was really stretched. He didn't really know how to manage people, how to be nice to people, if I could say that, and how to kind of spin all his plates. Now, I was supporting him as a VP. I was really going out there. And then eventually, after 8 weeks, he vanished. Literally on a Friday, he put his resignation in and he flew. So did the other school. So we've got 2 vacancies, 2 head teachers. Now, in the Middle East, when there's too much pressure, it's very easy for heads to run, unfortunately. The CEO said, look, put your hat in there, put your application in. We've applied through TES. There's loads of applicants coming in. I was offered the job as an interim head for both of the schools, while all of the messiness was happening, all of the applications. I wasn't entirely happy with that, because I'm thinking at the background, they're going to use me to go in and kind of stabilize the school, head above water, and they're going to bring 2 more head teachers in, and I'm back to where I was. Luckily, I was asked to apply. I applied, I got the job at it was the Al Jazeera Academy, ex-Royal School, but phenomenal because I was already based there. So I got the job after 8 weeks of being a vice principal as principal. Very, very excited. You know, first thing, picked the phone, spoke to the family in London. Some of them are on here as well. And it was such a journey for me to start. It was scary. It was very, very scary because it was a half term. Came back from half term, they've got a brand new head. I need to address the staff, 237 of them. And then I had to go into every single assembly and just make sure people know that there's not been much change. All of these things happened while in the background, I'm thinking, am I going to do it? Am I going to just do what I'm doing? Now, I was told something by the current vice principal who took over from me that, Oz, you're doing too much. You shouldn't do too much. Let it flow. It's a private school. All the sheikhs and shakers are coming in, paying lots and lots of money. Just relax, because what you're going to do is you're going to rattle the cage for the other schools. And all I was doing is working. I'm doing what I know best, and I'm doing what I've learned from the best in my journey. And that wasn't even my full capacity. I was just making sure teachers are comfortable, there's well-being in the school, curriculum is on par, if not better than other schools. And it was a competition there because there are 2 elite schools where they would only recruit the people that will fit right for them. And did we compete? Oh, yes, we did. We competed so hard. We had about 40 new members of staff that I recruited from the UK, got them over. My vice principal was the new vice principal I took on. She absolutely turned the school around with the girls' school, the boys' school, and Sheila Thompson. Some of you might know her. And we had so much fun improving the school. Now, we don't often say that. We had so much fun improving the school. It was late evenings. It was very early morning. 5 o'clock, we used to turn our coffee machines on just to make sure we are awake and we are doing what we have to do now. And wave at me when my time is up, because you know me, I could go on. Yeah. And eventually, we've done such a job that the CEO said, you know what, Oz, we are starting a brand new founding school, which means builders, architects, and education. Would you consider that? Now, I jumped straight for it. I said, you know what, I would love to do that. Jumped on, took the founding school. So imagine 1 year in Qatar, no students, no staff except a new VP, IT person, and a bursar. Yeah, it was really nice. It was pretty boring, but we got a beautiful school, ground zero, set up. It's at full capacity now. And then my kids started growing and, you know, approaching secondary age, and we had to come back. We had to come back for many reasons. My mum was getting old. My in-laws were getting old. Kids were about to join secondary-ish, that kind of borderline SATs year. So we decided, you know what, we're going to start making a move. We can always go back to international teaching. We loved every moment of it. Now, something I want to really discuss here and put out there is what happened when I've come back. A lot of people say, well, if you've done 2, 3, 4 years in an international setting, you're away. I've done just under 7 years. So I'm not aware with what's going on, naturally. I'm not aware with all the Ofsted changes, all the EIF changes, everything is going all over the place. First thing I did, I said to my missus and the team, right, I'm going to relax for a couple of years. We're going to move away from London, and we ended up in Leicester. Please don't ask why, but it's nice. Lots of greenery. And in the midst of things, a trustee's role came up, and there was a whole process of applying, and I just thought, you know what, I'm going to throw my hat in there again. I keep throwing my hats in everywhere. I throw my hat in there, and we will see where this leads. Because if I can get into governance and trustee level with my experience, 3 headships, going in, maybe they'll take a look at me. Thursday was a deadline. Saturday morning, I got a call to say, I want an informal chat with you before the formalities start over coffee, which was awesome. Had that chat, and then I went for the interview, and I got the job as a trustee in at that time there were 6 academies. Now there's 7, moving on to 3 more secondaries joining us in the Leicestershire. It's the Owls Academies Trust. Phenomenal people out there, and like David said, and Gwyneth and Pusha said, the top level needs to be right. We've got accountants, we've got finance, we've got bursars, we've got head teachers, and we've got an architect. What else do you want to kind of lead? Is it diverse enough yet? Not yet. It will be. It's happening. Now, the other thing I would like to kind of push there is from trustees levels, we've got 7 schools now. If I'm pushing that the governance level, or the governors, the local governing bodies in the school, needs to reflect the community. Now, the community in Leicester, central Leicester, is a lot of, I would say, Gujarati, Pakistani, Gujarati, and now there's a Bengali area, there is a Afro-Caribbean area. It's all mixed, but are they reflecting the school? Absolutely not. Are they reflecting the governing body? No. Are they reflecting trust level? No way. So that's something we need to change. Now, I've already, from my side, we've started putting spanners in the work, and the right spanners to say, right, when we get in the next governor in this particular school, we need to kind of keep an eye on equal opportunities a bit more severely than we used to. And then it's happened. So besides that, we've realized there is a massive drought of support for independent schools. And I was talking to Anne and a few of my other colleagues. There's a really large Academies Trust up in Cheshire. A good friend of mine, again, joined me from Qatar. He's back here now. We said, we're going to set something up so that we can support independent schools. We set up a company called Schools Plus UK, where we're going into independent schools, multi-academy trust, and doing all their schools improvement stuff, which they wouldn't have got. And then the independent school are so desperate. Then and again, I'm not promoting the companies, but then the Federation of Independent Schools came. David is smiling there. I am not promoting the company, but I'll send the emails later on. But what we are doing now is I am inundated with schools and head teachers who are saying, right, we need some help. We've got Ofsted breathing down our neck. we've got pre-Ofsted inspections, and then also some of our schools are due to close down because we really messed up. How do you help? Sometimes the answer is, I think the school needs to close down because you guys have made an absolute mess of it and the kids are suffering. And that would be an honest advice to some schools, and we have. And sometimes it's the whole thing about, right, you know what, this is where we can help you. And it's about that team. I can't help, I can't fix the school. I need a team around me. And then I have some phenomenal people around me, some on this group, some outside this group, who come in and kind of plug little holes to make sure that these are done. And I think that's it. That's where I am at the moment.
Your last one piece of advice, please, Oz, for me.
My last, I've got 7, but I'll do the one. Some say think outside the box. I said think outside the country. That will really upset a lot of CEOs and heads, but
Definitely
I think sometimes looking at some British schools outside the country would be awesome. And do link up with us. We'll support you as much as we can. And one more bit, like David said, try and get into governance. I always will say that from governance down, there's so much you can do. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much, Oz. Moving straight on to lovely Marva. Good morning, Marva. You're still on mute.
Good morning. I'll do a whistle-stop tour to my long story of a long life. Let me tell you where I am at the moment. In 2019, August, my voice is sore, I've been doing too many Zooms. In August 2019, I retired from headship. I was a head in Newham with Bushra for 5 years. And then I moved on to Edmonton, which comes under Enfield, for 19 years. So 24 years and 2 terms later, I gave up headship and I set up my consultancy. So currently I'm working across several local authorities. I'm looking at Black achievement, but I'm looking at developing middle leaders and just helping schools and leaders. Some leaders are really distressed at the moment, and just keeping them going to get through, not just COVID, but get through the challenges of leadership. I am a patron of these things I'm very proud of. I'm the patron of the Reach Society, and that really is a group of very dynamic professional Black men who support young Black men and girls, boys and girls, into university, Russell School Group University, into Oxford, school, that area, but also work with groups who are pulling people along and helping them to find their feet. So Reach, if you've got your feet, they push you. And I like working on the ground actually with people who are not quite sure where they're going, and I can help them to redirect them. And I'm the trustee of a charity called Success Club, and we go into schools and develop mindfulness with young children. It's a mindfulness charity run by a very dynamic Black guy called Tony Dallas. I'm a governor of 3 schools. Don't ask me why. I'm a governor of 3 schools. I'm still co-leading EAP, Equal Access for Promotion, for what's now the NEU, but it was an NUT and a national college program. I'm a mother, 3 sons. Some of you might know my eldest son, Adrian. He's, yeah, I thought so, David. He is a deputy head of a academy school in Derby. And I'm a grandmother, and I'm also the great-grandmother of 6-week-old Alia. So I'm a Windrush child. Yes, Adrian is a grandfather, David. I'm a Windrush child. And you know, folks, what we do is that we have to sanitize our stories sometimes, because so much of our stories and our journeys are filled with stress and trauma and challenges, that to get our story across, we often have to put some things aside. So being a Windrush child, very similar to Bushra, I came in 64, but my parents came in the 50s. So I'm one of those left behind children, and all the trauma and distress that goes with disconnecting from your parents and then working hard to reconnect with what is in effect strangers. Because my dad, I hadn't seen him for 7 years, and my mama hadn't seen her for 5 years, and 4 of us came to join my parents. And that was in the 60s. But my parents had a dream for us. Both my parents worked in factories, and their dream was that their children would not work in factories. So 4 of us and my youngest brother born here, we all trotted off and we worked in offices. But my memory of that time, folks, is that when you applied, there wasn't any, all the ads came out in newspapers, that was it. And I'd go to the phone box and I'd phone a company. I actually did a job called contometer operator, look it up. And I would always say, I am Black. And the reason I said I'm Black over the phone is that you get a bit fed up of turning up and they see you're Black. And then I didn't really want to, even as a young age, I really didn't want to waste my time. So I got into the habit. The sad thing is, in 2020, one of my young colleagues, having been told about a job in another school, she's a teacher in another school by a white colleague, my Black colleague said to me, I said to her, did you tell them I am Black? And I was absolutely shocked. I just could not imagine having to alert people to the fact that well, I should imagine it really, I've lived long enough. But I'm going to talk about a few shoulders that I've stood on. Rosemary Campbell, I've stood on her shoulders. We did Investing in Diversity together for 10 years and Global Majority. And she talked a lot about, as a Black leader, what additionality are you bringing to the role? And she challenged us, David, to identify that extra. She's now in Jamaica, but we're in very close contact. And this morning, I was watching Alex Barrett's full recorded, and Dame Elizabeth Anyonwe, Professor Dame Elizabeth Anyonwe, was on the program. And she's one of the people whose shoulders I stood on, because we started a Sickle Cell Society in the late, she's better known for Mary Seacole, but I know her from the Sickle Cell Society when there was no one in this country knew anything about sickle cell. And she stepped up, did her research. We started a society, and she prepared us novices to go into hospitals, homes, schools, and talk to people about sickle cell. And folks, that's where I found my voice, because I had spent 8 years working at home sewing with my 3 little boys, and I just stepped out of a dodgy marriage when the Sickle Cell Society came along. So I ended up going into schools, I ended up talking to doctors, I ended up going all over the place telling these people, and I was so quiet and so timid. But Elizabeth gave us a voice. So one of the things I would say to you as leaders, give people a voice. So in case I don't get to the end and give you any tips, and look for people that you can help. And then East London Black Women Organization, we started about the same time, the Caribbean Center in Newham. So I ended up learning a lot about leading and managing as a very quiet layperson, but stepping up to the challenge. And I think people have always seen in me what I had not seen in myself. So another tip is always seeing people and point out to them what you see in them to help them on their journey. I went to study at 31. There was an access course at North London Poly, and I studied, and I became a teacher at 36. So I wasn't worn out and knackered like you lot who started at 20 or 21. I started later. And at 44, I became a head teacher and had 3 interviews, and I got the 3rd one. But along the way, people had stepped up and said, the first time I went for a promotion in my 2nd year of teaching, this teacher came to me, white woman whose name was Heather, and said, go for that job, I've been watching you. And so I learned to watch people. I learned to look for talent, and I learned to develop that talent. And I didn't have a clue what she was talking about because I didn't understand the educational structure. From there on, I realized that all the things I had learned in the community, I could bring to leadership in education. So I stepped up, not really knowing, but having to learn to know very quickly. Racism in the workplace, oh my days. In my first school, I don't think they realized I was Black. I was sitting in the staff room, and this awful comment would be said about Black people. And folks, I'm better now, but I lost it. In those days, I was quick to lose things. I lost it. And I remember clearly one occasion, the deputy head walking into the room, putting her hands on my shoulders and very gently taking me out the room as I was yelling and screaming at my offensive colleagues. I think there was something about being a teacher and not being black, because I was in the staff room, so I couldn't possibly be one of these black people. The first HIP in Newham, Bushra, and like you, I walked in, the first black teacher in that school, I went in his head. The comment was, Newham needed a black head, didn't it? And that's how they treat the first year. If it wasn't for Marion Rose and Bushra, I could have walked away. They were bloody awful. They were so mean to me. I cried a lot, but not in front of them. But my message to you about leadership, the power of the power that leadership brings, and how we have to really be clear that we are using that power wisely. It is so important, because some head teachers think it's their right to undermine and destroy people. They really do. I've seen it. I was a deputy head to a head teacher whose behavior was not right. And then at a professional level, to understand the relationship between strategic and operational. We can become too strategic, forgetting where we're coming from and how tough it is on the ground. And one can't exist without the other. There's no point sitting around being strategic all day. You've got to understand what it looks like in practice. And as a new head, you often have to do strategic and a lot of operational as well to build up your credibility. People need to, when you're going to tell someone to do something, you have to be quite sure that you could do it yourself and know your boundaries. Spot talent, and I spend my life spotting talent. I pull people up as I go along. Don't ever take your foot off the door until someone else has put their foot in that door. And for those of us who've been on the inside, it's important to me that I let those who are coming in know what they need to know before they get there. So I ran my courses. Equal access to promotion is still going under the NUU, but for years, Rosemary Campbell, we ran Investing in Diversity, and they're programmed specifically for Black middle leaders going into headship. And there are Black teachers who don't want to come on those courses because they don't really want a course for themselves. But that is where my strength lies. And that's where my passion lies, as well as making sure children get the very best that they're entitled to. My second passion is developing my people. So the takeaways, because I know the time is running out, is that value yourself. You have to know what you're worth, because if not, someone is going to tell you, and they might not tell you the truth. Take others with you. Make sure someone else is holding that door before you. Work on yourself. Always develop. I'm way past. I'm the oldest one of the speakers, as you can see. Keep developing yourself. Focus on what's important. And what's important is children and their futures, and your colleagues, but most important, be kind to yourself. Just be kind to yourself. And in being kind to yourself, be kind to others. I have a long history. I have a long story. No, I haven't written a book. People keep saying write a book. But I have a story that says I came from a tower. Well, I came here from Barbados at the age of 12. I ended up in a tower block with my 3 boys and a dodgy husband. I got rid of the dodgy husband. I kept the boys. And I have worked my way through, and I have been blessed, folks, with meeting some of the most phenomenal people who held my hand and said, come with me, Marva. And I invite you to hold someone's hand and take them with you.
Thank you so much, Marva.
And you know I could talk forever, yeah, but I'm looking at the time.
I feel like standing back to stand forward at this point, because how one sums this event up, I really don't know. We've heard 5 absolutely fantastic stories this morning. I've got some main points that seem to be strands that have come through. The art of learning your craft, mastering your craft, because you can't expect people to say you can do it when you can't do it. So, you know, at all levels, knowing what you're doing. You said, Marva, valuing yourself. I love that phrase, valuing yourself, because if you don't know what you're worth, you will have others telling you what you're worth. Oz mentioned about the importance of governance, and also David mentioned about the importance of governance, and that rang true to me. I'd never thought about it before, but I became a teacher governor as a middle leader, and that did very much frame my thinking going into senior leadership. And lastly, that spotting talent, but taking somebody's hand with you. And I think it was Bushra that talked about the lighting another candle as you move through the profession. And you can see very strongly from the agenda this morning, and from putting on an event like this, we have candles to light and we have people to inspire. And all I can say is, you know, I've been around, but you have inspired me this morning, and I can see from the comments coming through that you have connected with everybody that has been listening to you this morning. You know, in fact, I think there was only one question about how do you do everything all at once, but I think that's what teachers do anyway. So no other questions have come through at this point. So what I'm going to do really is just to sum up by thanking all of you for, you know, you've given us a piece of yourself this morning, and nowhere else would people have been able to hear that story and connect. It's that connection to know that each one of us has a place now and in history to make our education leadership system better. So, you know, thank you so much